center.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my zchus to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Rabbi Dovid Gottlieb. Rabbi Gottlieb likely needs no introduction, but I'll give a short one anyway. It's probably not an exaggeration to call Rabbi Gottlieb the philosopher of the Jewish world for almost 40 years. From his position as a senior lecturer of Or Sameach, he's been monumental in the Baal Tshuva movement, and he has directly and indirectly probably touched tens of thousands of people in such capacity. I can tell you from my own early days that I recall sitting in Or Sameach, listening to Rabbi Gottlieb give a lecture, and thinking to myself, hey, this guy's pretty smart. But Rabbi Gottlieb's reach has extended far beyond the Baal Tshuva world, and indeed he has touched probably the entire frum world. With a background as an academic philosopher, Rabbi Gottlieb has given presentations to audiences worldwide on a variety of ethical and philosophical issues. He's also an accomplished author and has written books such as The Informed Soul, Living Up to the Truth, and Reason to Believe. He received his PhD in mathematical logic at Brandeis University and went on to become professor of philosophy at Johns Hopkins University. In the early 1980s, Rabbi Gottlieb began teaching at Or Sameach. It's a great zchus and a privilege to have Rabbi Gottlieb join us tonight as our guest speaker. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome me and giving a warm welcome to Rabbi Dovid Gottlieb.
I'm very moved. First of all, to see, as I was taught to say, friends of long standing, not old friends. Talmidim with whom we shared at Or Sameach years ago and sometimes decades ago, and to be introduced to a community that stands for Torah in the finest sense of the word. I'm a Boston chassid for more than 50 years. I was the chassid of the Boston Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak, for 47 years. And I can see his face in this room. What can I say? But it's a privilege to join you in your wonderful celebration. As you know, I teach at Or Sameach. There's an experience that newcomers have when they come in quite often, and we have to deal with it. The newcomer will come in, and we will provide him for places to go for Shabbos, and he'll come back devastated and depressed. So we ask him, what went wrong? What happened? I said, I'll tell you what happened. At the end of the meal, they took out those little books, and they started to rattle on in Hebrew, and the 7-year-old rattled through it at lightning speed. I'll never be able to do that. I'm 22. I'm a college graduate. This 7-year, I'll never get up there. I'll never climb to that level. And when he's 20, what's he going to be? They have to deal with that. Because they're coming in late. And they know they're coming in late. And they know that they're going to be behind probably forever. Probably forever. Does that mean that he's introducing himself to a life of continuous failure? Complete failure? Not a very inspiring way to start, and not enough motivation usually to keep him going. So we tell him a couple of things. First of all, as you start to learn, you will have that feeling over and over again. It's a little bit like climbing a mountain. A very tall mountain, and there are foothills leading up to the main slope of the mountain. So you climb to the top of a foothill, and you look up. The top of the mountain is shrouded in clouds. You can't even see it. Then you go down the next slope and climb the next foothill. It's still shrouded in clouds. You still can't see it. If you get too dispirited, you get too depressed, turn around. Take a look back. Look at the foothills that you've climbed. That can give you the encouragement. Okay, I can't see the top, but I climbed 3 foothills already. Look how much higher I am than I was before. We recommend that the boys should keep a diary. If they keep a diary a year or two after they come into the yeshiva, they open up the diary, they won't believe it. They won't believe the questions they were asking. They won't believe the problems they were facing. It's always important to keep track of the progress that you're making, rather than pacing yourself against that goal, which is placed so high, you don't really see progress. One of our boys once went to one of the Gedolei Israel, and I had to consult with him about a subject, and he wanted the Gedolei Israel to understand where he's coming from. So he said to the Gadol, I just want you to know I'm not about tshuva. And the Gadol said, why not? I think that applies across the board. It's not just that we all have failings and we should all do tshuva for our failings. But the attitude of a Baal tshuva who's looking to grow and measures himself in terms of his pace of development, that's something that should apply to everybody. I knew of one unfortunate case where a shidduch was proposed for one of our boys with a girl who came from a very fine, frum family. And after about 7 or 8 meetings, he broke it off. Because he said, I finally realized, she's 21. Her goal in life is that when she gets to 120, she shouldn't be less. She shouldn't go down. By 21, she's finished. She's already in. She's achieved her firm identity. He said, I couldn't live with someone like that. I hope that I'll never be finished. I hope that I'll be growing till my last day, facing new challenges, trying to acquire new midos, more ruchnias. One of the elements we need to keep in mind as we're thinking in terms of growing and measuring our progress and measuring whether we should be satisfied with what we've accomplished or not, is the inherent limitations of the progress. The Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva that because everyone has free will, every one of us could be as big as tzaddik as Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rochon of Asman has a ma'amar in which he says, if I would serve a Kodesh Baruch Hu with all my koyach for 1,000 years, I wouldn't come up to Moshe Rabbeinu's ankles. So then, how are we supposed to understand what the Rambam says? And Rabbi Yochanan Masman says, you have to understand that you could serve a Kodesh Baruch Hu with all your koach, just as Moshe Rabbeinu served the Kodesh Baruch Hu with all his koach, but the kochos aren't the same. And since the kochos aren't the same, the outcome isn't the same. You can't expect of yourself to accomplish what somebody else with more koach accomplishes. And indeed, the Rambam says, because we have free will, we could be as big a tzaddik as Moshe Rabbeinu. The question is, what does tzaddik mean? Onus Rahmana Patre, if something's beyond your capability, then a Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't expect it of you. You're not held responsible for it. So the only measure of a tzaddik is, did he do everything that he could? If you did everything that you could, in Olam Haba, you can sit at the right hand of Moshe Rabbeinu. The fact that he accomplished being Navi, the greatest Navi of all, the whole history of Klal Yisrael, and bringing Torah ben Hashamayim, and being the one to be Mala, Klal Yisrael from Mitzrayim. Kodesh Baruch Hu is the Motzi, he's the Mala. So says the Ramban. But that's not what asked of you. What's asked of you is to use your koyches. And one illustration of this in the Rambam is this. In Hilchos Deos, the Rambam talks about midos, and he says midos are on a continuum. There's a continuum of performance, too little, too much, and somewhere in between is the appropriate midah. Like spending money. Some people can't open their pockets. They can't open their hands. They're attached to the money to the point where they can't give anything away. The other people who just give it away indiscriminately. Both are bad. What's good is to think carefully, to evaluate, and make intelligent choices where to give your money. What happens if a person is in one of the extremes, and he's performing badly? Says the Rambam, the therapy is to go to the opposite extreme, which is also bad. It's ra. And then, by going to the opposite extreme, he breaks his addiction to the first extreme, and then gradually moves to the center where he can be in an appropriate position. That means, even though you have free will, you can't snap your fingers and solve the problem. The therapy means going from one ra to another ra, and then gradually achieving the appropriate position in the middle. So even the Rambam, who says you have free will, recognizes that there may be time that it takes for a process to take place in order to succeed. There's a subject which I'm going to just touch on briefly because it's late tonight, and that's the legitimacy of serving your psychological needs. People have psychological needs, and there's a question how to feel about them. Are they legitimate? Is it really just an obstacle, a michshol? Doesn't the Kodesh Baruch Hu give you enough strength to pass every test? Is this just another test? And I should deny myself the relaxation that I need, the music, which was beautiful and inspiring. I enjoyed it very much. I'm a musician, so I can tell. Or is this something which we simply have to turn our backs on? There are many, many sources that indicate that one should service one's psychological needs. I'll share a few with you. There's more Ksubis that says there are two psukim dealing with tzedakah. One is that dei machsaro, you should give a person everything that he needs, but you shouldn't give him more than what he needs. You don't have to give him luxuries. And then the Gemara says, on occasion, you might have to spend your tzedakah money to buy him a horse and rent him a servant who will go before him and proclaim his entrance. That sounds pretty luxurious. I guess a horse and a servant in the times of the Gemara was like having a Rolls Royce today. Is that what I'm supposed to spend my charity money on? And the answer is yes, because he came from rich circumstances, and if he doesn't have a certain advanced level of economic support, he'll be depressed. And it's worthwhile to spend your money on his psychological health just as much as his physical health. This is just as valid a way of spending tzedakah money. The Rambam in the Shmona Prakim, his introduction to Pirkei Avos in Perek Hey, discusses the principle of Kol Ma'aseh Yud L'Shem Shamayim. Everything you do, should do for the Kodesh Baruch Hu. L'chvod HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as a wonderful honoree said. And he says, if you're going to live that way, how would you eat? Well, of course, you would eat food on the grounds that it's helpful and gives you strength. You're not going to eat delicious foods because they're delicious. That's just etc. However, he says, imagine a person who's not getting adequate nutrition. Then you might have to hire wonderful chefs to produce a very tantalizing meal so that he will eat enough to keep himself healthy. Now the Rambam says, the same thing is true psychologically. There's a certain type of depression that can be brought about by living in drab and ugly surroundings. Such a person, or people generally, need aesthetic stimulation. The beauties of architecture and art and music and poetry, because otherwise something in the person's psychology shrivels and he can become depressed. And the Rambam goes on to illustrate this. He says, a person who's doing everything on Shem Shemaim is not going to sew golden threads into his clothes nor paint gold on the walls. And the reader says, of course, I mean, that's obvious. That's not the Shem Shemaim. Then the Rambam says, unless, meaning sometimes, the Shem Shamayim, you should sew golden threads into your clothes and paint golden murals on the walls. And the Rambam says, yes. If that's what you need to avoid depression, then sew golden threads into your clothes and paint gold on the walls. You have to be realistic about your psychological limitations. Those limitations determine what you need to do to produce the ideal avodas Hashem that you're capable of at the moment. The Gemara says, as I'm sure you all know, that when Yaakov and Yosef met each other in Goshen, they embraced, and the Gemara, the pasuk says that he fell on his neck and cried. Who's crying? It's machlokes in the Mefarshim. Most Mefarshim say that it was Yosef who was crying. The Gemara then asks, Yosef's crying and Yaakov's not? Yaakov thought he was dead for more than 20 years. He was mourning him. Now he's alive. He's embracing his son. If anybody should cry, it should be Yaakov. So as we know, the Gemara says he was saying Kriya Shema. Okay, he was saying Kriya Shema. Why? Because it's that time in the morning? You know very well. There's 3 hours to say Kriya Shema. How long does it take to say Kriya Shema? 4 minutes? Okay, it's Yaakov Avinu. 20 minutes? 30 minutes? He obviously chose that moment to say Kriya Shema. Why? So my Rebbe Zatzal explained as follows. We know, Chazal tell us, that during the time he was mourning for Yosef, Yaakov Avinu didn't have Nevuah. Why not? Nevuah requires a level of simcha, and he didn't have that level of simcha. Whether that's a fault in Yaakov Avinu or not, the Rambam says it is a fault. He didn't spoil broken. Others say, would take it as honest, but at any rate, he didn't have it. Did Yaakov Avinu say Kriya Shema in those 20 years? For sure. In Kriya Shema, you makabel omachu shamayim. You're saying to the Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm yours. I give myself wholly to you. When I give myself to the Kodesh Baruch Hu, I don't hold anything back. When Yaakov Avinu said Shema during those 20 years, he didn't hold anything back, but his gift was less because he was less. There was less of him. Now he pictures, I'm going to meet Yosef. Like he says, I see your face, I could die now. I'm going to embrace Yosef. I'm going to feel the return of kochos that I haven't had, psychological kochos, that I haven't had for 20 years. I'm going to be able to say a Shema that I haven't said in 20 years. That's what I want to do. I want to say Shema and give myself, all of my new self, my reinforced self, to the Rebbeinu Shalom. This, the Rebbe Zatzal said, is an example of how your psychological state determines the quality of your avodah. The Rosh Yeshiva tells, one of the essays in the collection Shirei Das, is Palez Magla Raglecha. And there also, he says, your psychological state should be one of self-confidence, strength, optimism, happiness, even joy, because a person in that psychological state can do the mitzvahs that the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants in the quality of mitzvah that he wants them done. And in order to be that way, in order to feel that way, says the Shirei Das, a person has to have aesthetic stimulation, like the Rambam said, calm, relaxed conversation with other people, not just what chiddush did you learn in the shir today, and what new halacha did you learn, but how are you? How are you feeling? Anything that I can help you with? Friendly conversation. And he says, physical pleasure. A certain amount of physical pleasure is necessary for a person to have that upward spirit with which he can reach out to other people and be sensitive to their needs. And he can feel simcha on Yom Tov and on Shabbos. There is an Indian of simcha on Shabbos, even though it doesn't say in Pasuk that you have to do it. Because those who know, V'yom simchaschem, with the chasotros, Chazal say, Elo Shabbosos. To be able to feel the joy of coming to a Kodesh Baruch Hu in Tefillah, which the Ramchal says is free dveikus. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I want you to work for dveikus. It's a gigantic spiritual accomplishment, but 3 times a day I'm offering it to you free. Come to me, I'll allow you presence, in my presence, to be connected to me. Without that psychological base, a person can't do those mitzvahs the way Kodesh Baruch Hu wants them to be done. That being the case, one has to invest in one's psychological state, and this is part of one's avodas Hashem. The Ramchal says this, and the Rambam says in Hilchos Deos as well. Avodas Hashem is 24/7, 365, because avodah includes 2 parts: mitzvos and everything that's necessary to be able to do the mitzvos, including earning money, including sleeping, including rest and recreation, if that's going to give you that psychological basis with which you can do the mitzvos with the quality that the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. Avodah is 24/7, 365. But avodah includes everything. Avodah can even include doubles tennis, because that's what a person may need. I speak as someone who does physical exertion. I do try to work out regularly, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference in my quality of relating to people, in my concentration in tefillah, my concentration in learning. All of this is avodah. That means none of it is a compromise. None of it is a failure. None of it is something the person should look at and say, I'm not really on the madrega that I should be on. Now, it changes through life. All of you are old enough to realize that. The things that you need to support your psychology when you're 20 are not the things that you need when you're 30 or 40 or 50. It changes. And some of the things that were very important at 20, without hearing music, or without reading certain things, without going into the forest to see the beauties of nature, I'll be on a spiritual flat. Maybe at 40 it doesn't require that anymore. But I will tell you that there are stories of Gedolei Yisrael who did this throughout their lifetimes. I have a friend who's an American, because the American is not too refined and he doesn't know any limits of interpersonal relations and so on and so on. He was at a beach, a separate beach, and he saw an older man, quite old, sitting on a beach chair, all alone, just sitting there. An hour went by, 2 hours went by. He was interested. What is he doing here? No grandchildren, nothing. So he went over to ask him. He asked him, and the person, the older man, I happen to know the older man's name, but I can't say who it is, was one of the biggest poskim of the 20th century. So what are you doing here? So he said, I'll tell you, I'm a posek. Because I'm a posek, I spend my time with very careful attention to details, making very careful distinctions between cases that could be similar, but might have nuances of difference. From time to time, I come to the ocean. I observe the greatness of the sea, the largeness, the overwhelming power to restore my psychological balance so that I can see the big picture in addition to the little picture. Here's one of Gedolei Yisrael using the aesthetics of the sea in order to give his psychology the right balance to be able to be a better posek. That's what we're talking about. His sitting there and watching the ocean was a avoda because it prepared him to be able to do mitzvahs in a better way. We have to give ourselves that same freedom to be able to use the resources that exist in order to give ourselves the psychological balance to do the avodah the best possible way. The famous story of Reb Zisha, and this is extremely, extremely important. Reb Zisha said, when I come after 120 to Shamayim, and they ask me, Zisha, why weren't you Abraham? I'll say, you didn't give me Abraham's neshama. You didn't give me Abraham's position in the world. You didn't give me his courage. And they'll ask me, Zisha, why weren't you Moshe? I'll be able to answer. But when they ask me, Zisha, why weren't you Zisha? Why didn't you use your abilities, your kochos? Why didn't you realize your potential? Then I won't know what to answer. But that means a person must never evaluate himself looking over his shoulder at somebody else. Neither way. Neither to say, look what he's accomplishing, look what he's doing, look what he's accomplished. I'm held back, I haven't done as much, and he's been in less time, and he had less time to do it. Never. And also the other way. I came in, I know when I came in, look how far I am ahead of all of those. I'm doing fine. A comparative evaluation is something that we should never give into, and it's very hard. Because in this world, comparative evaluation is everything. Everything is competition. You're competing for the contract, you're competing for the job, you're competing for the next position. And if you win the competition, you feel that you're a success. In your avodas Hashem, there's no competition. There's only living up to your own capabilities. And those capabilities, as we said, change in life. So, every one of us is in progress, is in process. We're part of a developing effort which has its own successes. And it has also sometimes when we're disappointed, we have to do better. How do we keep a balance? There is a challenge that many people face, and it's a natural challenge. It's a challenge only to noble people, to people who really have the right values, people who really want to accomplish something. And the challenge is to balance my aspiration to grow, my sense that I want to get someplace else, together with my sense that where I am is okay. Where I am is all right. It sounds like there's almost a contradiction there, because if I think I need to be someplace else, then where I am is not all right. Where I am is a failure. The answer to this is that I have an aspiration to be someplace else tomorrow. But it could be that where I am today is all right for today. I'm not satisfied where I am now for tomorrow. Tomorrow I want to be a step further. But I can say, if I take the advice that I gave to the Baal Tshuva and tell them, look back to where you came from, I can say, yes, I made tremendous progress to get to where I am today, and I hope and expect to continue to make that progress tomorrow. Then I can balance being satisfied with where I am today, considering where I came from and what I've accomplished, together with my aspiration to be someplace tomorrow, next week, and next year. There's a difference, I think, between standards and ideals. Standards are what you must live up to now. If you fail to meet your own standards, then you feel guilty, rightfully. And unlike a great deal of modern bankrupt psychology, there's nothing wrong with feeling guilty. Guilt is a tremendous motivator to be able to do better. Standards are what you have to live up to now. Ideals are not what you have to live up to now. If you have satisfied your ideal, you have bad ideals. Ideals are supposed to be beyond your reach. And you measure yourself by making progress in that direction. So that at the end of the day, if you can say, I took one more step towards my ideal. My ideal is about 2,433 steps off. But I took another step, and I'm another step closer. Then that day is a success, and tomorrow you have one less step to go to reach that ideal, which you may never reach as a human being. Never reach in a lifetime, but the ideal is there to motivate you to climb and to make progress. So that you don't, as we say in street speech, we don't beat ourselves up because we haven't achieved our ideals. We can feel happy and satisfied with the progress that we've made without then becoming complacent and saying, I don't have to take steps beyond. I asked my Rebbe Zatzal when I was becoming a Baal Tshuva, what about cheshbon nefesh? Should I do a cheshbon nefesh at night, once a day or once a week? And he said, it's okay to do that, but start with something good. Think over your day and pick on something good and then dwell on it. Polish it. Feel the glow of the good thing that you did. And with that glow of feeling that I did something good, then look at the other things which you think might have not been done as well as you could, and think in terms of improving them. Because if you don't have that sense of accomplishment, satisfaction for the good thing, then you won't be able to take facing the things that need improvement, and it can crush you. It can lead to depression and a loss of energy for the entire project. The Rebbe Zatzal used to say, I'm almost finished. Rebbe Zatzal used to say, you know how you feel if you're struggling to do a mitzvah, and you finally win the struggle, and you do the mitzvah, how do you feel? You feel great. You feel terrific. That's right. You should feel that way. And there's no egotism in that. There's no anochius in that. There's no selfishness in that. This doesn't detract from your mitzvah at all. It doesn't detract from your mitzvah at all. Schar mitzvah. The Bartanura says 2 pshatim. Everybody knows the first pshat, and nobody knows the second pshat. We'll see. Maybe the Rosh knows. The first pshat is, if you do a mitzvah, Kodesh Baruch Hu gives your schar, is an opportunity to do another mitzvah. The second pshat is, when you do a mitzvah, if you have hanoah, if you have oneg, if you have benefit from doing the mitzvah, that's also mitzvah. It adds to the mitzvah. It doesn't detract from the mitzvah. I don't think he means if you get paid to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, you get more mitzvah because of that. But if you're doing mitzvahs out of ahava, you want to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom, and you feel terrific after you do a mitzvah, that makes it a bigger mitzvah. You don't feel that was a failure, that you got something selfish out of it. So the Rebbe Zatzal said, if you imagine how you feel after you do the mitzvah, now you're in the struggle. The Yetzer Hara has got all sorts of excuses not to do it. If you could only think ahead, boy, when I win this battle, and when I do this mitzvah, I'm going to feel terrific. And use that sense of good feeling, good accomplishment. Later, use it now as your motivation for doing it. We would win more battles. We would win many more battles. There's actually a school of psychology. I berated psychology, but I think a lot of psychology is desperate. But there is a school of psychology that teaches this idea. I learned this from my Rebbetzin, which she taught me many years ago, and she reminded me of it on the way over tonight. It's called behavior modification. The crucial step in behavior modification is set intermediary goals. Set a number of intermediary goals which are reasonably easy each one to accomplish, so that when you accomplish that goal, you can pat yourself on the back and say, yes, I've done well, because I've taken this step. If you measure yourself against the ultimate goal, it's easy to fall into that sense of insufficiency and depression because I'm still so far from the goal. But if you set the intermediary goals, then you're able to do that. The Rebbeinu Shalom should give us, as he gives to every true Oved Hashem, should give us the sense both of the continuing challenge, not to be small-minded about the ideals that we set for ourselves, but also the sense of satisfaction that we have when we do really accomplish something, and we can pat ourselves on the back and say that we have accomplished it. This is something that we should give ourselves because it will help us ultimately in accomplishing the great goals that we have set for ourselves. I will say again, I was very moved by what I saw. The honoree, I had a chance to speak with him at some length, and it was a wonderful opportunity. And to see that the community that you have built and that you are developing, kol hakavod. What can I say? You have a beautiful kehillah, and you're bringing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rotzim into the world. Your rotzon, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give you the strength to continue. Goodbye.